Welcome to Curious Conundrums, the place where mysteries come alive. Here we explore the strange, the unexplained, and the stories that blur the line between myth and reality. From chilling cryptid encounters to eerie true stories, this channel dives deep into the world's most unsettling phenomena. If you enjoy unraveling these mysteries, please like and subscribe. It truly helps support the channel and allows me to continue bringing you incredible tales from the unknown. Now let's step into the shadows together and uncover what waits beyond the edge of understanding. Whitehall, New York became a Bigfoot hotspot in the 1970s, but one account from a local farmer stood out. Late one August evening, 47-year-old Harold Carr reported hearing his cattle screaming from the field. Armed with a flashlight and a shotgun, he rushed out to investigate. What he saw chilled him to the core, a hulking figure covered in dark matted hair standing over a calf. The creature, which he described as over 7 feet tall, lifted the calf as if it weighed nothing. Harold fired a warning shot, and the creature turned to look at him, its glowing yellow eyes reflecting the beam of his flashlight. The creature dropped the calf and vanished into the woods, but Harold later discovered massive footprints in the soft soil. Local authorities dismissed the incident, but Whitehall residents continued to report sightings in the area for years. A terrifying encounter near Fouke, Arkansas, the home of the Fouke Monster, made famous by the 1972 movie The Legend of Boggy Creek, surfaced in UFO news clipping services. Witnesses Terry and Kathy Ford reported hearing bone-chilling screams near their rural home late one summer night. The couple initially thought it was a wounded animal, but when Terry went outside with a flashlight, he saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at him from the tree line. The creature began to howl, a deafening guttural roar that vibrated through the air. Kathy watched from the window as the creature stepped into the moonlight, revealing a massive hairy body and long arms that nearly reached the ground. It lingered for several minutes, then disappeared. Local newspapers reported similar incidents in the area, tying the encounter to a series of Bigfoot sightings that plagued southern Arkansas throughout the 1970s. In July 1982, a Boy Scout troop camping near Marble Mountain experienced a night of terror. The troop leader, Bob Evans, reported strange noises, whoops, wood knocks, and heavy footsteps, coming from the dense forest surrounding their campsite. The next morning, they discovered that one of their tents had been destroyed. Large footprints surrounded the area, measuring approximately 19 inches long and 7 inches wide. A young scout claimed he'd seen a hairy man walking through the woods during the night, but the adults initially dismissed it as a prank. Days later, a local ranger confirmed that similar tracks had been reported by hikers in the region. Marble Mountain has since become a hotbed for Bigfoot activity, with dozens of sightings reported throughout the 1980s. Chestnut Ridge, Pennsylvania, has long been a hotspot for both UFO and Bigfoot sightings, but one story from 1979 stands out. Mary Jacobs, a schoolteacher driving home late at night, was forced to stop when a massive figure darted across the road in front of her car. She described the creature as ape-like, standing nearly 8 feet tall with glowing green eyes. When she rolled down her window to get a better look, the creature let out a piercing shriek and bolted into the woods. The next morning, local hunters found claw marks gouged into nearby trees, as though something massive had ripped through the bark. UFO news clipping services linked Mary's account to multiple reports of UFO sightings in the area that same week, suggesting a possible connection between the two phenomena. In June 1974, 2 fishermen on the Washougal River in Skamania County claimed to have come face to face with a Bigfoot. John Klein and his brother Peter were fishing at dusk when they noticed a foul smell like rotting garbage wafting through the air. Moments later, a large figure emerged from the trees across the river. The brothers described it as covered in shaggy brown hair, with a cone-shaped head and long arms that dangled unnaturally low. The creature watched them for several minutes before crouching to drink from the river. When Peter shouted in fear, the creature stood, let out a loud grunt, and disappeared into the forest. Later, investigators found tracks on the riverbank, leading deep into the woods. In December 1986, a logger named Jake Morris had a terrifying encounter while working deep in the Snohomish wilderness. Trapped in his cabin by a snowstorm, Jake heard heavy footsteps circling his property late one night. The next morning he found massive footprints leading from the tree line to his cabin and back. That night the creature returned, slapping the cabin walls and letting out low, guttural growls. Armed with a rifle, Jake sat by the window, watching as the shadowy figure paced outside. It wasn't a bear, he told reporters later. It was walking upright like a man, but it was bigger than any man I'd ever seen. After hours of torment, the creature eventually left. Jake's story was later corroborated by a neighbor who found similar tracks leading through his property. The Snohomish area remains one of the most active Bigfoot regions to this day. It seemed to reflect the light from William's lantern. It stood motionless, watching him. William dropped his tools and ran, not stopping until he reached his truck a mile away. When he returned days later with a search party, the cave appeared abandoned, but they discovered massive footprints leading away from the entrance. Several others reported similar encounters around Mount Shasta throughout the late 1970s, solidifying its reputation as a Bigfoot hotspot. In October 1980, a family living on the outskirts of Estacada, Oregon, began experiencing strange occurrences. It started with the family dog refusing to go outside at night, and ended with something far more terrifying. The father, Carl Jensen, recalled waking up to a loud banging noise coming from the backyard. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped out onto the porch and froze. At the edge of his property, illuminated by the faint beam of light, stood a towering figure. It was easily 8 feet tall, Carl later told local reporters, covered in matted brown fur, and it was just staring at me. Carl shouted, and the creature let out a low growl before retreating into the forest. The next morning, Carl found deep footprints in the soft earth, some nearly 2 inches deep. His neighbors later admitted they'd heard strange howls at night for weeks, but hadn't spoken up out of fear of ridicule. A seasoned hunter named Tom Reynolds had a face-to-face encounter in the dense Ouachita Mountains of Oklahoma during the fall of 1975. Tom was tracking deer when he noticed the forest had grown eerily somber. Tom froze, gripping his rifle, unsure whether to shoot. The creature let out a low, guttural grunt, then took a step forward. Tom later admitted that in that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense that he was being warned, not attacked. Slowly, the creature turned and walked back into the forest, leaving behind a trail of deep, clear footprints. This encounter was reported in multiple newsletters and followed by similar sightings in the Ouachita Mountains throughout the 1970s. During the winter of 1983, park rangers patrolling the Ridge Parkway near Asheville, North Carolina, discovered a series of massive footprints in freshly fallen snow. Each print measured roughly 18 inches long and 6 inches wide, spaced far apart, as if something enormous had walked effortlessly through the deep drifts. One ranger, Carl Whitney, followed the tracks for nearly half a mile before they suddenly stopped. It was like whatever made them just vanished, Carl said later in an interview. That same week, a nearby camper reported hearing heavy footsteps circling his tent late at night. When he unzipped the tent flap to look outside, he saw a tall, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by trees. The figure remained motionless for several minutes before disappearing into the forest. The Ridge Parkway has remained a focal point for Bigfoot researchers, with reports of footprints, howls, and sightings continuing into the present day. Deep in the rugged wilderness of Siskiyou County, California, where dense forests blend seamlessly with isolated mountains, comes one of the most unsettling Bigfoot accounts ever documented. Featured in the UFO news clipping services in early 1982, this story involves not just a fleeting sighting but a prolonged encounter, a siege, that left a family shaken and searching for answers. The events took place over the span of 3 harrowing nights in the summer of 1981, when a rural family experienced what can only be described as a coordinated series of events involving one or more large, unidentified creatures. The Harlan family, Daniel, his wife Sheila, and their 2 young sons had recently moved into a small, aging cabin near Bailey Creek, nestled on the edge of a sprawling forest. Daniel, a construction worker, had taken a summer job nearby, and the cabin served as temporary housing for the family. It was secluded but peaceful, at least at first. On the night of July 16, 1981, the peace was shattered. Sheila was the first to notice something strange. As the family sat by the fireplace after dinner, she heard a faint knocking sound coming from outside. It wasn't rhythmic like a woodpecker, it was deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. "Dan," she whispered, "someone's outside." Daniel, thinking it was a prank or perhaps a curious animal, grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. He shone the light into the trees but saw nothing unusual. As he turned to go back inside, he heard a low, guttural growl that made his stomach drop. It was close, but the darkness masked its source. Daniel didn't tell Sheila what he heard. "Just a raccoon," he said, brushing it off to avoid worrying her. But inside he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching him. The following evening, the family put the boys to bed early, but around midnight, Daniel and Sheila woke to the sound of heavy footsteps circling the cabin. The footsteps were deliberate, slow, calculated, and far too heavy to belong to a person or common animal. Daniel grabbed his rifle, quietly telling Sheila to keep the boys inside the bedroom. Heart pounding, he opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. This time his flashlight caught something. 2 glowing red eyes set high in the trees, staring directly at him. It was standing between the trees, maybe 40 feet away, Daniel would later recount to investigators. Its eyes were reflecting the light, and it was huge, I mean massive, 7, maybe 8 feet tall. It didn't move, it just watched me. Frozen in fear, Daniel stood there for what felt like an eternity before the figure turned and vanished into the trees with shocking speed. When Daniel returned inside, he locked the doors and told Sheila what he'd seen. Neither of them slept for the rest of the night. By the 3rd night, the tension in the cabin was unbearable. The boys had noticed their parents' unease, and Sheila insisted they all sleep in the same room. Around 2 a.m., the noises started again. First the knocking, then the heavy footsteps. This time, it was worse. Something began hitting the walls of the cabin, hard enough to rattle the windows. Sheila screamed as a massive thud struck the back of the house, followed by deep, guttural growls that seemed to echo all around them. It sounded like there were 2 of them, Daniel said later, one at the back, one circling to the front. They were testing us. Gripping his rifle, Daniel opened the front door and fired a warning shot into the air. For a moment, the forest went silent. Then came a scream, an inhuman, ear-splitting howl that made Daniel's blood run cold. The noises continued for another hour, growls, knocking, and the sound of something pacing around the cabin, just beyond the reach of the flashlight beam. Finally, as dawn began to break, the sound stopped, and the forest grew still. When daylight arrived, Daniel searched the perimeter of the cabin. What he found left no doubt that something large, and unknown, had been there. Massive footprints, nearly 20 inches long and 7 inches wide, encircled the property. Some prints were so deep that Daniel believed whatever made them must have weighed at least 600 pounds. Even more disturbing were the claw marks gouged into the wooden siding of the cabin, as though something had been trying to tear its way inside. Shaken and terrified, the Harlan family packed their belongings and left the cabin that same day. Daniel reported the incident to local authorities, but they dismissed it as a bear attack or overactive imagination. When the story was picked up by UFO news clipping services, it sparked interest among Bigfoot researchers, several of whom visited the site in the months that followed. Investigators found evidence of more tracks in the area, as well as reports from other locals who had heard strange howls and knocking sounds near Bailey Creek. The story became a cornerstone of Bigfoot lore in Siskiyou County. Years later, Daniel Harlan was interviewed again for a documentary on cryptid encounters. Though time had passed, his voice still carried the weight of that terrifying night. "I don't know what it was," he said, "but I know it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a man. Whatever's out there in those woods, it's smart, it's strong, and it knows when you're afraid." The Bailey Creek incident remains one of the most chilling and well-documented Bigfoot encounters of the early 1980s. It serves as a reminder that the wilderness still holds secrets. Secrets that are waiting, watching, and perhaps testing those who dare to enter their domain. These encounters from the 1970s and 1980s remind us of how much we still don't understand about the wilderness. Whether these sightings are glimpses of an undiscovered species or something stranger, they capture the imagination and challenge our perception of reality. If you've enjoyed these stories, please like, subscribe, and share this video to help grow the channel and keep these investigations alive. And if you've had your own Bigfoot encounter, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story.